Welcome to Kadam, the Small Steps podcast, where we try to showcase individual perspectives of recent graduates about different pathways of life. I'm Arjit Singh, and today I will continue to try to uncover what it means to have a traditional career. Consistency is key, and finding the time to do what you love are two statements that I really usually live by. But even on the best days, they can be so contradicting. After being out of the podcast world for months, I have decided to pick this back up because of how much I love it. Not only have I not been recording, I have realized that I also haven't been listening to as many podcasts as I like. Moving to a new country isn't something that is new to me, but doing so in a pandemic world has definitely been a little bit of a challenge. Doing things that I never thought I would be doing and missing out on some I wish I was doing more of is a balance I'm trying to make. Anyway, I'm now tuning in from Toronto, Canada, and I'm so excited to be here. But this isn't the time to talk about me. While I'm sure some things might come up about my journey, what I'm more excited to hear about is our guest's journey. So let's start the talk. So our guest today is the owner of a studio he calls Marino Fabrications, based out of Columbia, South Carolina, and one of the founders of the podcast, The Soda City Sit Down. He also graduated from the Auburn Industrial Design Program in 2019. He looks at paving his own path and loves to challenge the status quo and the generalist way of doing things. He loves watching Jeopardy and classical movies. Last time we talked, he had watched one movie almost every day. Like so many of us, COVID hugely impacted his plans after graduation, but to a certain extent, I believe, he has made something good out of it. We'll chat about that and more on today's episode. Without further ado, let's welcome Andrew Marino. Welcome to the show, Andrew, and thank you so much for coming on.
Wow, what an introduction, Arjit. I appreciate that. I forgot, I did, gave you some of my information so long ago that I had forgotten what I had said. So that's funny. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it happens with some guests too. And it's like, when there's, especially when there's a gap, everybody's just like, okay, thank you so much. But it's like, it's just something nice to come into. So I'm glad you liked it, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, we were recording a day after Christmas, so I'm glad to be here. I'm relaxing at home. I'm wearing some comfy clothes, so I'm not in a tuxedo for this. I would be if that was otherwise any other day of the year.
Me too, bro. You know how I am. It's definitely I'd show up to school like that. Like it's definitely something I like to do.
Absolutely,
it is a relaxing time. So I'm glad that we're getting to spend it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're actually my guest after, 4 or 5 months being out of podcasting, and I'm definitely very excited to see where this goes. And first of all, I really just wanted to ask you about that movie streak that I was talking about, right? So how long was it? I think you answered that you had been doing it for like about 5 months, I think. And then what is the most memorable one you would say and why?
So it was actually last Christmas. I live with my grandma and she's 92. So she was 91 last year. And I started watching Turner Classic Movies with her, which is like a classic movie channel. And they have like no commercial breaks. They do a lot of like commentary on it. And I always loved movies. So for me, it's like, it's really good I hadn't been able to catch up on like these classic movies that like I had heard about in so long. And then they're like, I can watch them with my grandma. There's not going to be anything like explicit or anything that I'm going to be embarrassed to watch with her. She's going to be able to understand it. And it's going to be stuff she grew up with. So it's like a win-win-win there. So like last Christmas, they did like a bunch of Christmas movies through December. So I watched like one every day with her, and they're all new movies I had never seen before. And I was just like, well, let's just continue it on to January and February. And I think I had gotten to about like April or May of literally like seeing a new movie every single day. And I'm still on and off. I'm not doing it every single day now, but it's like our routine was like Jeopardy at 7:30, Turner Classic Movie starts at 8. And we would be doing that. And like, man, there's some good movies out there. I saw a movie. So one of the more memorable ones I saw, there's a lot, but one of the more memorable ones I saw was a movie called All the King's Men, which they did a remake for in the 90s. It's from 1949. And it's about this politician who is like kind of a progressive new age politician in the 50s, or I guess in the late 40s. And he's like not succeeding. He's getting beat out by his conservative kind of political candidate all the time. So he like kind of falls into corruption and falls into kind of using his networking to go against his candidates. And he ends up kind of being the person he hates. And it's like a lot on like how like news and like articles and information can sensationalize politicians and can kind of corrupt the way we view politicians, how you can kind of think you're doing the right thing. And then all of a sudden you kind of wake up one day and you realize that you've actually been doing worse for the people that you started to do this for to help.
Yeah.
And I thought there was just so many parallels to what we have going on right now, just in our lives, that it was like, you could release this exact same movie today and there was still so much to learn. And I was just like blown away by how real some of that stuff is and how unchanged like news and sensationalism is. So I was, there are some classics on there, but yeah, that was something that kept me busy during the height of the pandemic last year, especially in the holidays.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think with that, it's just some movies are just timeless like that, right? There's just like, you pick them up one day, like sad day, happy day, whatever it is. And they're just like this, you can relate to them for some reason, right? So would you say it was the characters that most got you in? Or would you say there was the stories themselves or just the art of filmmaking? Because I know like you took a class in media arts in high school. And, I was just thinking that possibly shaped some of this, but how do you think you got into that, and what was the aspect that kept you in that for the longest?
I think I've always been into transcendentalism when it comes to art in general, where you can view something or look at something or be a part of something where you can kind of forget about what else is going on in your life, and you can kind of envelop yourself into a story, into a certain set of characters. And I've always found that really interesting. And it's always been really easy for me when a story is good or when art is good for me to just kind of dive deep into it. And so it's a mix of everything: characters, sometimes character performances, a good story that's got me like really clung on to something. There are a lot of cinematography, a lot of, camera editing I'm really into, especially with modern movies. You don't get that a lot with older movies, but when you do, the few that you do, especially the experimental ones, I'm like, oh, wow. Like they've been like, this is where that like editing style came from that you see now, so I just love the art of it. And I think, like when I did a class in high school in media arts, it was a lot of, that was my media arts 2 class was all in filmmaking and editing, and media arts 1 was all in Photoshop, Illustrator, those tools. And that's what I was doing engineering classes in high school at the time. So I knew I wanted to do something in either like modeling or creative work or something. I knew what industrial design was at the time, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into it. And then when I was doing media arts 1, which was a lot of Photoshop, a lot of Illustrator, that's when I decided, I think this is what I want to do with my career. And of course, like all the movies in the second class was just great. It was just icing on the cake, but that was kind of what solidified what I wanted to do in my career.
So you mentioned modeling and stuff. Like, was that 3D modeling or like, just like walking around on the stage? Like, what do you mean by modeling?
Oh, no. So it was Autodesk Inventor, I think we were working on at the time.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it was like I took 3 engineering classes, and it was very, very basic. I remember looking back on it now. I remember like I was trying to model a tube of PVC, and I couldn't figure out how to make multiple concentric tubes and extrude them. And now I'm like, dude, how easy would that be to do? I could literally do that in like actually 10 seconds. And I was like, I don't know how to do this. Like I was basic back then.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And definitely, it's been a long time since then and we've grown. So coming off of that too, thinking about the things that you mentioned with, how you like to also think about the characters, how they're formed, how they're developed. Is that something that you have thought about doing long term? Like, even if it is being like a movie critic, what does it really, I'm not sure what it really takes to be one, right? So I was actually looking at a couple things just like when we talked about this or from my notes. And from my very basic research, it just looks like at least a couple things that could be and like that one could be, right, and make money from is something like a freelance writer or like a journalist or a columnist or something like that, and especially in places like, I don't know, like New York, California, things like that. You're looking at a decent salary. But you're looking at, if you're especially getting into animation, things like that as well. Because I've been doing a little bit of Maya myself. So just if you're getting into some of that too, it's definitely something that can pay and will pay. And it's interesting too, especially if you like it. So have you thought about that at all?
Well, see, one of the problems, Archit, is when you hear the term "everyone's a critic," it comes from someplace real. That there are so many people, especially on YouTube now, that are like YouTube movie critics or do movie commentary. That it's like a really, really saturated market. But you're right. I have thought about it, and the one thing I have thought about is how to do it uniquely, or how to do it in a way where it would give someone or an audience something new that they haven't seen, because there are so many people trying to do different things, again, on like a YouTube platform or critics online, or, obviously the well-established critics are going to be doing very traditional standard stuff because they're, your Roger Eberts and stuff. Like, people go to that for that. But if you're on YouTube, you got to do something like way out there to get the audience you want. So I don't know if I would do generally like a critic. I've thought about doing a podcast on movies. A lot of people I know, which is really weird to me, that a lot of my friends, especially like people I know who are like in the creative world, haven't really seen any movies, or like they've seen a lot of like the new movies, but they haven't seen like anything older. Or I have friends that generally have only seen like 20 movies. Like I'll like mention, like, I won't mention Jaws, but I'll basically mention something like that. And they're like, I've never seen that. I'm like, how have you never seen like these movies that like everyone else has seen?
One of those people, man. I can't.
Exactly. And I think there's something to like kind of exposing people to that, because that's how I felt when I was little. Like my dad was really into old movies, and my grandma knows a lot of these, and like having someone expose you to it that's like your age, but also is like, no, like, let me explain to you why this is good, besides just like, oh, I watched this at 2-cent theater when I was, some people aren't into that. I am. But like, if it's someone like me who's your age telling you why this movie is good, then there may be some people who would get into it. So I may think about doing that in the future in terms of like a podcast or a YouTube thing or something, and have people give me their commentary on what they thought of a movie they saw for the first time. I've even thought of like you want to talk about like big dreaming. I've always dreamed about just like everyone dreams that they can like walk onto a football team and like a Kurt Warner and be like, I was a grocery handler 2 weeks ago, and now I'm a professional quarterback. I want to be one of those like Robert De Niro's who's like, I've never acted before in my life. I've never taken an acting course. I'm just walking on set, and it's just like, you're made for this. It's like, I feel like I have a level of like expression that I think translates, but I think I would just be trash at it. Like, I think I'm one of those people who thinks they would do well, and then it's like, oh no, you're terrible. But that's here, that's like almost, that's unachievable, but it's something I have dreams and sometimes you got to let your dreams be dreams. But no, everything and realistically, a podcast or something like that would probably be my gig.
Yeah, no, I think I've at least myself or known a couple of people that would also think about things like that, right? Just walking into the movie world and not having taken an acting class and things like that. But it's just like you said, because at the end of the day, I think it is something that's natural, right? Like, you can't. I mean, it is like you're trying to portray the most natural way that you can, at least for most movies, right? You're not actually trying to portray like an actor. You're trying to portray somebody's life. So
yeah.
If you're good at, I guess, living, right, you could technically potentially do that. So that definitely is something that would be exciting, and just to be able to even give it a shot, just like walk on stage or just to audition and just go from there.
I think it comes from the fact that when I was little, I have a sister that's 12 years older than me and a brother that's 8 years older than me. So a lot of times I was either like picked on, or it was really easy for it to be like, just, for me to not get in my way because I was too young. So at a very early age, I learned how to cry on demand to get what I wanted. And so my parents were always like, he's going to be such a good actor one day. Cause like, I would literally like, I would pull out these crocodile tears and watch my sister get in trouble and then just smile at her. Cause I was like, I knew, like, it was so easy. it's so easy for me to just turn it on and be like, oh no, okay, now let's get the waterworks going. Let's get what we want, So maybe that's
always, especially happens to the youngest one, right? The youngest one is always like that. It's just like we're just used to getting our way, like making it up a little bit, playing along,
embellishing, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's interesting, man. And you mentioned your podcast, or you mentioned creating a podcast, and I know that you've already created one, which I think was one of the brands that you were mentioning in our survey as well. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that is also a brand. And I know that, I kind of want to talk about that a little bit and want to know what made you start that, right? And what did you think of the experience? Anything else you would like to share? Like, of course, feel free, but what was it that got you into it? Of course, the creative side that you think about, but also what was the experience like?
Yeah, so I think I always had a drive to make something like that because I felt like I generally can sometimes have a perspective that's different than other people. So I felt like I had something to give in that way. And I just thought it'd be something fun to do. And I had just moved back to Colombia, and all the friends that I went to school with in high school, pretty much stayed in South Carolina, and I was the only one who went out of state. So it was a way for me to kind of do something with them where we were back together and we were doing something fun. And it would kind of get me hanging out with my friends again. But it was on what we kind of all grew up with or all were close to, especially with them going to South Carolina, was that it was South Carolina sports and how important that is. Unfortunately, I guess it's better now, but unfortunately we started it in a time where South Carolina sports had nothing going on and they were trash and everything. So the first year was all just very depressing content for the most part. But I just had fun kind of talking to my friends, doing research, kind of getting involved in the creative element to it. I did the logo design for it. I did all the branding. I was doing all the editing for the podcast, doing all the audio mixing, adding in effects, adding in fun things. It was very fun. We had we had 5 people to start on, and then we ended up adding 6, which was, if anything, the one thing I would say is don't have that many people on a podcast because it's just impossible. And it's so much work. I spent 2 hours every Wednesday editing. It was a weekly podcast, and I was trying to do merch. I was thinking about 3D printed things I could do, like bottle openers and stickers and T-shirts and hats, and trying to merchandise it because I think now the Twitter they have has over 3,500 followers, and it's growing pretty well. But for me, it was just I'm not really I'm into sports, but I'm not that into sports. I was doing a lot of research because I wasn't as knowledgeable, whereas my friends, I think, had more intuition when it came to it, but they weren't doing as much research, which would also tick me off because I'm sometimes your intuition is wrong, and I'm also doing all this work, and I'm editing the podcast, and I made a logo, and I'm spending the money to host it on my website at the time, that there were people who weren't putting in any effort, and it would bug me because sometimes if you're working on a group project, it's the same thing you're working on a group project in school where it's you're doing all the work and someone's just all right, well, I'm just gonna turn it in, or I'm just gonna let you do everything. I'm gonna sign my name on it, and it's no. You can't do that. Yeah. So especially if I'm doing it every week, and it was I was doing it for free, you don't make money on a podcast. As you know, you don't make any damn money on stuff like this. But it was I think it's important to do a podcast on something you're truly interested in, not necessarily the people you're interested in, because that can only sustain you for so long. And I think I've listened to other podcasts talk about this, and I think it's important to have conversation outside of the podcast. And a lot of the times it was we were on group chats where I was some of the stuff we're talking about sports and just some of our commentary is so funny that we need to do this podcast. And then it got to a point where we were holding back a lot of our comedy and a lot of our conversation on certain topics because we were no, save it for the podcast. And it was well, now I have I don't have the same conversation with you guys anymore. It's change things, or it's just I feel this is a business now at times, or it's play at other times. And there wasn't really a good understanding of who wanted to keep it serious, who wanted to keep it just let's go with the flow. And so I think if you're going to start something with a group of people or with another person, setting ground rules of what you want it to do, what you want it to be, what kind of area you want to hit, and the audience you're trying to hit, and also just keeping up with people, seeing how people are doing on a daily basis, again, this is if you're doing a podcast with someone else versus just like, all right, well, I'll talk to you when we record again, because then it's just like, well, now you're only talking to me when it comes to work, and I don't want to do this all the time. And so generally that's it, just having people who are willing to see the vision you want it to be. Like, I knew it could be certain things, and my friends weren't as interested in that. They just wanted something to do every once in a while, or wanted to get big in our social scene or do this or that. And I was like, no, this can be a lot more, or this can be this and that. And it's just having a cohesive understanding at first, instead of being like, oh, we'll figure it out later. It's like, no, well, then when later happens and later's already on our doorstep and no one's still thought of this, now we're all like, all right, well, when we have like actual radio shows hit us up and we don't really know how to pitch ourselves, or we've got like one person who's pitching us one way, another person who's pitching us another way. Now no one knows what we are who's out there. So there is a lot of just like miscommunication with that. And I was just overworking on so many other things that, like, generally I was just like, I want to focus my time into other aspects. I wanted to start like a small business and everything. That I was just like, let me just drop this. You guys are fine. I taught them how to edit. I taught them how to host it. And I was just like, be free, do your own thing. So, I mean, I still keep in touch with them, but yeah, I was just like, I need a break from this. So no hard feelings with that. It was just a lot I learned. And so the next podcast or anything else I do audio wise, I know kind of the steps to take now.
Yeah. No, the thing that you mentioned about doing things in a group, especially when there's 6 people in there, right? It's almost like a startup. It's not just a podcast. You're thinking, especially if you're thinking about branding, things like that, making it big, or taking it to the radio show, things like that. It becomes more than, like you said, more than just like the social circle that you're in within a town, right? It becomes a thing where, of course, some of us are going to have different expectations than the rest of the group, but it's finding that balance, right? And sometimes it's just like, everybody else was okay with it, let's say, but since you were putting in a lot more of that work, a lot more of that effort, it just felt like something that would either drain you or would make you like just not even interested in it as much anymore, right? Or certain aspects that did interest you, and then certain ways that they took it that just like made you fall out of it, let's say, right? So
yeah, because I definitely think like one of the things also too, like just making something that you want to do with, like in our case, our creative knowledge, and have a bunch of people who aren't creative at all and are just like, hey, I'm like I sell like insurance. Like, I don't know anything about logo design or anything about hosting a podcast. I know about sports and that's it. And then, so then not only having that dichotomy, but then also being like, all right, I think there are certain things as a creative that I've been working on. There are certain things that I've published and done that I feel like I'm entitled to certain aspects of having some creative freedom here, or having, if we do make money, having money go here or there, and having people view that entitlement as, oh, you're entitled, period. It's like, no, I'm entitled because like, this is my career. This is something I've have a degree in. And, I've done the work. And sometimes it's not about entitlement as in you're selfish. It's you should know what you're worth. And I think creatives, we need to understand that. I learned that a lot, is that before I was too afraid to really kind of divulge like that, or like if I'm selling something, selling it for enough, or selling myself for enough, and then having people kind of misunderstand that for so long and just like, screw it. Like at this point, it's either I leave or you value my work or value my assets, and you're not doing that, then, and again, no hard feelings to it, but that's just how it is. That it was a big learning curve with that. And it was something I was glad to have done now versus doing it later in life where it means more. So now the next time I go into something like this, I'll know what I'm worth. I'll know how to pitch it properly. And especially to people who don't understand the creative process.
Yeah, no, definitely. And thinking about that balance too, and going back to it, you kind of do that with freelance as well. I know that a lot of people that I've spoken to on this podcast as well have mentioned, when they're doing freelance projects, thinking about, what kind of value they're putting out, how they're maintaining even like a balance with work life, things like that, right? How do you set boundaries for yourself, or those rules that you're talking about, thinking about worth? How do you do all that? Do you set hours that you work, or it's just go with the flow kind of a thing, especially right now with work from home and of course, just like freelancing that you're doing a lot more?
All right. Tough one there. Like not really well. I mean, I'm sure other people who have been on here who have been doing freelance in some aspects that isn't like, they don't have like a 9 to 5 also going on would also kind of agree that like you kind of like work whenever you can and your schedule is very like fluid. If you're not, if you have deadlines or not, sometimes it's like, this is your only deadline. You just have to get it done by this point, or I want to see some sort of deliverables, but around this time. That everything in between start and finish is so just like open that you can kind of schedule your time, whatever, which is good because it's like, I'm more of a night person. So I can schedule more work at night than I could during the day. But at the same time, because I'm working mostly on my own, or I'm working for like a final product price where it's like, I'm paying you for the work at the end. I'm not paying you necessarily for the hours you put in. That like sometimes I can't overwork myself, or I can front load or back load it. And I'm like, I'm working like 20 hours one week, and then I'm working like 50, like it feels like 50 hours another week, because I'm like putting in so much time and no one's really above me kind of managing my time schedule, or I don't have, I don't have like like OSHA over here or I don't have a union behind me telling me I need to stop working. Right. So it's generally like when you see an opportunity in front of you, especially with like what I'm doing now, it's like I've got to kind of hustle and beat competition to certain things sometimes, especially if I'm making things on Etsy or 3D printing things too, that it's like sometimes I got to like hurry to get stuff out because I've got people that are like, hey, I'm like getting a 3D print, like either like I'm getting a farm ready or I'm getting like the infrastructure ready to start like producing stuff. I want to license what you're making right now. When will it be done? And it's like, I'm trying to get it done like in the next month or so, but like modeling is not sometimes modeling something that like you don't know how long it'll take sometimes. It could be, I could figure this part out tomorrow. I could figure this part out in 2 weeks. And it's like, there are so many things in freelance that are not guaranteed, as everyone knows. So kind of trying to find a work balance is hard. I try to find my breaks when I can. I try to find, again, that's where the movies come into play. That's where watching Jeopardy with my grandma comes into play. Kind of having one time during the day that is guaranteed to be a stop point. Because I remember in college, I would eat dinner sometimes at like 10, 11 p.m. because I would just be like too busy focusing on this project
that I didn't have
time to stop. Yeah. So it's like having a timer. It's like, all right, 7:30, got to start watching Jeopardy. 8 o'clock, if there's a good movie on, watch the movie. If not, I'll go up and start working again. But like that at least keeps me where it's like, all right, I've got this guarantee every single day. And like, sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need a little bit like that. I think everyone needs structure, but if you've got like zero structure in freelance, you need something that you're like going to stop everything for.
Yeah.
Which can be hard for creatives to do.
Yes. And how do you charge for something where you don't know how long it's going to take, right? So you said, it could take me 1 day, it could take me 2 weeks, it could be a month till I get it delivered, right? I know that you're saying you don't set maybe like hours or deadlines or things like that. And that's something that this like semester, like I've learned, right? With a soft deadline and a hard deadline. So technically a hard deadline for the first thing where it would be like, we would turn in this project every, let's say like Monday. So we turn it in Monday and then we would get some feedback in class that week. And then we'll have another week to kind of just like play around, finish things up. But I know a lot of people just wouldn't get their stuff done, right? They would just like blend into this thing where it's like, yeah, it's like a soft deadline. We can just kind of turn it in and it doesn't really have to look as good. But it's about saying, it's mostly done. And it's just about, okay, final touches or making corrections or taking the feedback and putting that in. And I'm sure that happens with you and your clients as well when you're listening to them and you're like, okay, they're saying maybe you could change a couple things. Maybe you could tweak a couple things here and there. How do you find the time to do that? How do you manage your finances? Like, do you use any software, like things like Trello or I'm not sure, like, like time management and whatnot? Because I've been doing a little bit of that. Like, I've never been one of those people that actually even follow the calendar, but this semester I really have focused on at least using like Google Calendar. Like everything is on there. Like if it's not on there, like even if I'm on break right now, I'm like, that's where my work schedule is going to be because I've just gotten used to that. So how do you do that?
Yeah. So in terms of like the freelancing I do, I haven't really had a client. Like a lot of my clients have been kind of either like they wanted like a concept to pitch to another company, or they wanted like a set of concepts. So I haven't had the opportunity just yet to have like a client really come back to me and be like, after you finish, now I want some other quick changes, because it's like, we just want a bunch of concepts. So that way we can be like, all right, these are cool. We'll pitch them to a larger firm from this point, because we don't even know how to like, I just have an idea that I can verbalize. I don't know how to put it in an image to paper or diagrams or anything. So like, you're going to help me get to that point. But it's like, I wasn't like, last one I did, I had like a week to do it. And I ended up doing 5 days of it, because I really spent the first 2 days just kind of sitting around and thinking of the idea that they wanted me to do and trying to like formalize it. And that's even harder, because it's like, how do you value you kind of like sitting on your couch or you laying in bed and just closing your eyes and trying to think of concepts monetarily?
Yeah.
It's like how many hours did I put in, but like, was it work, Right, so that's tricky. But it's also like, like after that project was like, oh shoot, like I should have been kind of documenting this a little bit better, because like I didn't really document that. I didn't even really think of that time being put in. I just thought of the 5 days I put in after that and how much time and effort that was. And I, getting paid accordingly. I got paid after the fact. So it was like, here's the final delivery. You paid me. I gave you a price for the concepts first. So it was like, I'm not going to do this, because I could spend 7 days doing this and then they just never pay me or walk out. So I got paid for the work first, and then I got paid for my labor after. So at least it was like, paying half and half kind of thing. Pay half now, pay half later. Yeah. So it was like this concept of, maybe like $200, $300. And then my labor was like $15 an hour or something. Then I got paid for that after the fact.
Okay.
Because then they feel like they're confirming something, because then it's like, I could ask all this money up front, and then I could also dip too.
Correct.
Like it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
So in that case, it works. But if I'm doing something where I'm licensing a product or licensing a good to another maker or another brand or something, that's tricky, because I'm not having my work get paid. I'm not having my labor and time get paid for. I'm having the final product get paid for. And that's more of a chance, and that's more of a gamble, because you're like, I know someone's interested in this. Someone has verbalized that they want to license it, but they're not. It's the same way you would be an independent inventor, maker, designer going to some sort of like like product fair or product expo and pitching your product to a larger company, like a Milton Bradley with like a board game design. You've done all that labor. They're not paying you for the labor. They're paying you for the idea you're presenting to them now. So it's like, is it worth gambling me working for free on this for the idea that I would get a licensed product out and get a percentage of dividends back, versus doing more freelance work where I'm getting paid hourly, but I know sometimes it's lower pay. I'm not finding as many opportunities there. I'm not kind of hunting for things the same way I would be if I was trying to license stuff. Sometimes I think it's easier, because you can kind of see what's in the market and make things. Because sometimes if you got to wait for a client to come through your door and pitch you an idea, sometimes it's like, I have an idea already. Let me just pitch it myself. And then that's kind of what most of my stuff is now. But it's really tricky. And I think that's something I wish we had. I know when we were in school, we had a professor, Rich, who did he did a semester at one point where you had to like start an Etsy store or start selling stuff on Etsy. And I wish that was like more, if not like, he still did that, but I wish like at least like we did mocks of that at one point, like especially we had a careers class. I wish there was more of that, because like it's one thing to be like, I need to understand what I'm worth, but like understanding the ebb and flow of like contract work, understanding the ebb and flow of like freelancing, and like, all right, like how am I going to pitch this to a client? Like, what is it going to be like when I don't have anyone coming through the door or any freelance work? What is that like? And how do I find other work that isn't freelance work that I'm doing on my own volition? That's tricky. And a lot of that is understanding the market you want to work in and understanding what's not being made out there, and kind of hitting the market before your competitors. So there's a lot of like just business side that I think is really important to creatives and people getting into this industry, that is super valuable information.
Yeah. And going from that too, because it really, I think, hits a point where I want to kind of dig deeper into what you do as a freelancer and some things that you've really focused on the last year or so, right? With with your Nerf 3D printed parts and things like that. Like, so I want to jump to that and talk about some Marino fabrications in a way, right? I know you were shipping some 3D printed parts all over the place. Last time we were in conversation. Are you still doing a lot of that? Who is your primary customer? If you want to talk about your product a little bit, like where do you see? Because I know you were talking about like, you know, hitting the market where maybe there's not a lot of saturation in a way, right? Where do you see the placement of that? How have you seen the response of that? Because I know that you also won like a couple of prizes and things like that for these things that you were making. So how do you find that niche? Let's say if it is a particular amount of people that are trying to get this, and how do you target them? And how do you make them trust you in a way?
Yeah, it's a super interesting question, because I think if I was to go and like tell young designers or kids coming out of school, like kind of where to focus your mindset, if you don't know what to do, and if you aren't on that like guaranteed kind of track of doing like the IBM, the Braun products, like that, the stuff that the school wanted us to do, like where to hit, it's like trying to find an industry that you're interested in yourself, but also something that you feel like you can put your effort into. Like if you're really into soccer, well, you're not going to be making soccer players, but you can make soccer cleats. If you can't make soccer cleats, maybe you can make the bag that you can put cleats in. Maybe you can't make the bag, maybe you can put some accessory to clean cleats, and like, okay, well, maybe I can 3D print that. And it's like, all right, start small and see if there is an industry out there. Hit up different communities. There's Reddit. There's plenty of forums out there. There are communities for everything. YouTube. There are plenty of people who are interested in all different things. And you can hit up these markets and be like, hey, I've got a survey that like, if you guys are really interested in this sport or really interested in this product line, you know, fill out my surveys, especially if it's a community that's out there. People love talking about what they're interested in, and they'll give you good information if they're out there. And then like, okay, yeah, there seems to be a lot of people who might want this type of product. Like, let me try to like apply my skill set to something that they feel like they don't have product that reaches what they want. And then you can make stuff on a small scale that a lot of people love supporting small business when they can, especially if it's affordable. The thing is, like a lot of times with small business, some things can be so unattainably unaffordable because you're not working on mass production and mass product lines where you can produce things at a smaller price point at a larger scale. That although people want to support small business, if you're making something that costs like $300, is bespoke every time and custom, it can be hard for people who are your age or interested in the things you're interested in to apply it. So I tell people like do small 3D prints, like do things that are like one part or very simple, where you can mass produce it, nothing that requires paint or anything. And then you can get that out your door really quickly, which is funny because what I finally finished, it like requires a pretty decent amount of work to get out my door, but it's not impossible, right? It's not crazy.
It's attainable in a way.
It's obtainable, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was always interested in this market. That's what kind of got me into industrial design, was kind of me taking apart Nerf guns and understanding how they worked. It was a really kind of like established community. It's well established now, but at the time it was this growing thing. And there's a lot of really cool work being made that felt very pirate-y. You know, it was like people doing things that were outside the norm, that were making things that companies didn't want you to make, that were designing things that were against the status quo. I really kind of enjoyed that when I was younger. And so I was like, well, let me go full circle and take my ideas and my education into this. And I put the Submarino Fabrications brand is out there. I kind of have that so that way it's not just toy design. If I want to put other things on that brand, it's not like, I think I had like Submarino toy production initially on LinkedIn. And I was like, that's too specific for a side hustle like this. I need it to be more broad. And it's just like right now I'm trying to follow kind of product trends. I'm trying to see where people want things to be. And right now I've sold close to 65 product. And again, like it takes me about a week to do these every time. So it's a little bit of, I could sell more if I didn't have a backlog of product, right? Because I can't sell 50 of these and have them all be done in a week because I've only got one printer. If I had 30 printers, it'd be a different story. But generally when you're making something that larger companies aren't making, that people feel like their voice isn't heard, people get really attached to that and people really love that stuff. So a lot of my reviews, a lot of the people who see this are like, man, like this is really good. First of all, it's good work because I have a degree in this versus just some Joe Schmo who's got Fusion 360 for free making this and has a 3D printer they bought with forever extra money. But it's like you're making the things that we feel like companies don't make. You make things that they, for whatever reason, just aren't profitable at a large scale, but at a small scale, they can be. And we're glad you're doing it. And I get a lot of reviews like that. And one, it helps me continue to do this because I can look at that late at night when I'm struggling or I feel like my work is not very good. And I can be like, all right, people do care. But having the clientele there is important. So I'm trying to now transition into other products now. I've got 2 or 3 things. Again, I've got a license deal that I'm working on. I've got another smaller 3D printed part in pieces going out soon because I know like you have to follow the market. And that's huge as a freelancer to follow the trends and keep up with things. Because if you continue to make the same product, if you see your sales dwindling, you either have to advertise it better or have to understand that people are moving on to other product, especially in this industry where it's like every year new product comes into the stores that like, again, all about understanding the business side, all about understanding market trends and keeping up with what's out there, keeping up with what's being sold on Target, what's being sold in Walmart, what's doing well on Amazon, what's doing well on Etsy in my case. What are other people 3D printing and selling?
Right.
And yeah, it's super important to keep all that into consideration. But I've been doing that for a while. I've actually been working and doing some sketching that I needed to redo for the kit I sold on Etsy. I've got the whole thing here if you wanted to see. So all the green and white is 3D printed with all the metal I've fabricated.
Awesome. Yeah.
This is a store-bought product. So that's, again, understanding market trends. Like a store-bought product is only going to be in stores for so long. So you can't always, once that's out of store shelves, you no longer have a market. So I've been doing that. I've been doing sketching and trying to get stuff on my portfolio, which is why you didn't see it when you looked at my website, but it should be up in like the next week or so. So, because obviously
always updating, man.
I'm trying to get into real work and trying to get with a company because I can only do this for so long, right?
Right.
So,
yeah, and I think that's
long-winded, but I'm very passionate about that question.
Yeah, no, definitely, and that's kind of where I wanted to transition a little bit too. And before we transition, actually, I want to hit a point that you talked about with 3D printers and only having one, and just like having a backlog and not investing maybe in another. Would you say that's because you don't see the demand all year round? Or would you say it's just something that you can't possibly control at once?
It's tricky because I could buy, especially with the money coming in, I could have bought 3 other 3D printers. It's just space for me. And it's about, I usually run these all night, or the one I have I wouldn't run it all night if I had 4 printers, because then I wouldn't have to keep up with demand. I have to run it usually during the night to keep up with sales, but it's still noisy. It's a lot of heat. It's a lot of energy sometimes. It's not a lot of energy, but, it's more energy than not being there. And if I have 4 of them, then it is a decent amount of energy. So I had to think about that in terms of consideration. I'm not necessarily, paying for rent like I normally would, where I've got my own house. I can do whatever I want in my own house. There are other people I'm living with that I'm trying to keep into consideration. Right. But I mean, for a lot of makers, it's like, when we graduated, I bought my 3D printer for like $350, I think. And it was a good printer and I still use it today. And it's still really pretty solid. And I think like we had 3D printers at school. So, I mean, we didn't really necessarily need them, but I think like only 1 or 2 other people, I only know of 1 other person we graduated with that bought a printer the year we were in school. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that many people who have printers still. And it's like, sure, if you don't want to do 3D printing stuff, I totally get it.
Yeah.
And I was like, for the price point for you to be fabricating stuff on the side, at least for class, or if you want to sell something on Etsy, like you can do it. Like, why weren't people doing it? Like it's for one printer, it's such a small investment that like there are some you can buy now that are smaller for like $150, $100, and you can mess around with it. You can learn a new skill. There are plenty of companies that are 3D print companies that like that. Then it's like you can versus, I use one in school. Like people have one that I keep up and maintain.
Right. Yeah.
Like money is not an issue. It's just space and time and energy and all that. But it's been a godsend to have that. As you know, I got that my last year of college, and it's made its money back and then some for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And so making that transition that you talked about with working in the industry, because you don't want to do this for, I don't know, like forever, I guess. Since this kind of always has been a hobby, let's say even like the last year of college when you did buy that printer, it's something that you did for yourself, but also, started making money from and things like that. Transitioning from that, what do you think of going into that industry? Like, is it going to be toy industry? Is it going to be just, like products like that, like, injection molded and things like that? Because I know, like you mentioned, not everybody bought a printer, but that's also because not everybody ended up in creating 3D printed or injection molded or plastic products, right? So it's a little bit different there. But have you had any like luck with companies, especially with like COVID? I understand it's like a little bit weird, but have you had any luck with companies that are looking for people like that? Things that worked, that didn't work for you, like the toy industry in general or Nerf, however you want to take this.
Yeah. And you're right. Like I definitely like if you want to do 3D printed stuff or you want to small product 3D printer for sure. But if you're doing research development, like you're doing and other things, finding your industry is important. It's like, I think I mentioned at one point, like if I was back at school or if I was telling students like what to look forward to, I would be telling them a lot of things now that I'm out of school, because like one of the things that kind of sucked when we were in school is that a lot of professors let you we had a lot of freedom to do what we wanted and to focus on what we wanted. And were you in my studio our last semester?
Oh, which one was that? Was it Chris?
Was that Chris's?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where we could do what we want. Yeah. Right. Where we had freedom like that in school to really focus on things we were interested in. But the thing is, a lot of the things that people are interested in sometimes aren't marketable, or sometimes there's not a lot of job opportunity out there. And, if I wanted to, I found out now that being in the industry or looking at jobs that like, along with like automotive design, the toy industry is not only one of the most competitive of the product industries, but it's also, I don't know the word for it, but it's also the one where, you have a lot of older guard that wants to keep their job and is not very adamant on having younger guard come in and take that position or take those roles. Where you have a lot of people who are aging who sometimes have really bad ideas on how to approach things, especially to children. You're going to be like 60 years old and like, all right, I think I probably know more about applying for children just from age perspective than you do.
Yeah.
But there's that aspect, but it's also like, people in our school, professors kind of knew that. And I wish like a professor would have been like, yeah, I know you're interested in this. Like you can do this, but like, this is also the deal with the industry. And if you want to take this advice, you can. If you don't want to take this advice, you can't. But I have people who I know who I'm friends with in the industry or have networked in the industry or have worked and made products for companies in toy design. And they're like, yeah, it's rough. Like Hasbro is a company that is very rough to work for. As much as I would love to work for them, they're one of the big three along with Mattel and Lego. I went and did an application and went to Lego at one point. They're completely different than the American toy companies. The American toy companies are very conservative, very lock and key, and are like, you can't if you want to do anything else in toy design, good luck. You're not going to be able to do it while you're working here because then you're competing against us. And that's one thing I've thought about. It's like, there are plenty of dart blaster companies out there that do stuff better than Nerf that I've applied for or I've looked to work for. But it's also like, would I want to like transition my hobby into a full-time thing? And now I can no longer make this stuff because now I can't work on Etsy anymore making this stuff because then I'd be competing with the company I work for. Or the work I would be making for my company is now no longer work I can sell on my own.
Conflict of interest. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, there are other toy brands out there that do toy related stuff that aren't dart blasters or something. And then I can still do this side hustle, if they allow it, versus, being in direct competition. So I've thought of that for sure. Right now, I'm like, I'm just looking for any type of work that I can apply for. And again, the thing with school is that like a lot of times if HR is looking at your portfolio and sees you've got a bunch of toy design stuff on there and you're applying for a industrial design job on making AC unit parts, which I have applied for, which is one of the most ridiculous jobs I've applied for and didn't get, because I'm sure HR looked at my portfolio and said, oh, you've got an action figure on here, you've got a Nerf thing on here, you've got a medical device on here. Well, we make AC unit parts, and I don't see any AC unit parts on here. And it's like, yes, but like you can dilute the things on here and see, oh, it's a CAD work. You're doing sketches on here. You're doing product iterations. You should be able to do this just fine. But I think a lot of people who are hiring just aren't educated in what we do. And when they see our portfolios and they're like, you're applying for this specific job, your product portfolio isn't this specific line of work. It's too hard for me to put two and two together, I guess. But sometimes you do have product designers looking at portfolios or get to the stage where they're looking at your portfolio. But a lot of times it just goes to HR and they just don't know what to do with it. And again, that's where I wish like my professors were like, no, get a decent amount of like standard product design portfolio pieces on your portfolio, along with like some stuff you want to do on, or maybe one project that you want to like focus on in your career. Because like then if it's general product design work, you can apply literally anywhere with that versus like my niche in toy design. I'm kind of stuck in toy design now because it's a very niche industry. As I guess you can kind of understand with research, like if you have all your portfolio pieces are more research heavy and it's like, well, I need a job. Here's like a product design job that I'm going to apply for. Like sometimes they're like, well, we're not seeing a lot of product on here. It's like, I can do it. This is just these are the prompts I was given. Like I can't control the prompts someone gave me. Right. So it's tricky.
So how do you, I guess, let's think of it this way. How do you create your own prompt in a way to make sure that you're catering to the right audience? Because I know, like everybody said, like cater your resumes to particular companies, cater your portfolios to particular companies. If you have to do like a design sprint, do that. I understand it takes more than 2 days to put something out that actually makes sense for a particular company, right? Plus, if I'm spending like a week, 10 days to not put in my application, a lot of times it's like, well, too bad, it's gone now, right? But with you, it's like, I think you did mention, it becomes a niche and things like that, but I think that's something that you're interested in, right? So making the Nerf blasters, things like that, like with toy design, like, do you see yourself working in that industry in a way? Or do you just want to, at a point, just get a job, wherever that might be? Like, because I know, like, if you're working in an industry for long enough, like, that could be something that you really love, or it's just something that, like you said, before people have gotten into it, now they're just like, hey, like, we do this and we're good at it, and we just don't know anybody that can beat us, right? That kind of thing. So what do you see?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like there are so many people just in toy design alone that just hate kids, but they're good at what they do, right? So it's like very odd, and it's an oxymoron. It's like, well, you're designing for clients you don't like. Like, how does that work? And that's, for me, it's like, I applied for a job at Formlabs, which does SLA printers and everything, because I do 3D print work for sure, but it's not toy design. And, I would still love working there. I don't think I would hate working there at all. But yeah, I mean, like right now I'm in an unfortunate situation with a lot of graduates who graduated around the years we did with COVID and everything, and just kind of were like in a pseudo recession that, you kind of have to take what you got and you have to take what you're given. And like, you don't have a lot of times the luxury to be like, oh, well, I want to do this and I don't want to take this job if it comes up. I'm like, I will take anything that comes my way at this point, because like I need the work. So it's kind of nice in a way, because it takes the choice out for me, where it's like, otherwise I'd be like, oh, I don't know, there's so many decisions. It's like, you don't have any decisions. It's kind of nice to not have to worry about that. But yeah, like, I don't know, you were hitting on something in the beginning of that statement that I kind of lost track of. And I thought it was really interesting. It was really an interesting point. I think you were talking about like what work I wanted to do or how I wanted to apply myself. I don't know if you remember what you started that with. you were talking about something about resume and something too, right? Where you're
molding a resume, right? Molding a resume, molding a portfolio, doing that particular thing for a particular company when you're putting it out, when you're like, okay, like I want to cater this resume or this portfolio to a particular company.
Yeah, it's tricky because like I don't know, like at this point now, I'm very, very good at CAD. But a lot of times like companies don't just want to see that, obviously, but like sometimes I think, okay, now I remember what you said. Like, I think now, like, as much because I look at Instagram all the time, and I'm sure you do, and see what gets a lot of likes and see what gets hits, and I'm sure it pisses you off just as much as it pisses me off. Where it's like this guy did like the most basic sketches and like pretty sweet renders, but like they just like made a bunch of shapes that don't do anything, and they got like 2,000 likes. Where it's like I could post like a full finished piece and get like 50 likes, and obviously I'm probably not utilizing my network properly as they are. But it's like, why is that getting hits when I'm not? And it's like, I don't want to be doing that type of stuff where I'm just like doing a bunch of renders on the internet and like, it doesn't mean anything, but I know it's going to get me likes. And I feel like I'm like selling myself out in a way. But I think companies look for that now. Companies look for like that Instagram heavy kind of like that, like just really cushy looking design work that isn't as that doesn't have as much technicality to it, because you can always hone that in a company.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're doing something vague, it's like, okay, well, you're doing this vague. If we specify you to do this certain thing, you should be able to do it. But I think beyond that, I think a lot of companies look for like an it factor. Like, again, I'm very good at CAD, and a company who wants to design is looking for a designer who does a lot of CAD work, does a lot of sketches, may see my portfolio and be like, that's really good work. And I've had people tell me, like, your work is really, really good. But I think a lot of companies, when they're looking at a portfolio piece, they want to see something students or people freelancing, or you were saying marketing your own work. Like how would you, when you don't have anyone you're designing for, how would you market that? Or who do you work? You know, are you designing for a person? Are you designing for a system? I think a lot of it's that it factor where it's like someone can look at your piece and be like, oh, okay, like this is a cool idea. I don't really care what the sketches look like. I don't care what the cat looks like. The idea is really cool. And I think that we were always told, like, you look at one page of a portfolio, they're going to tell you yes or no. They're going to, you know, and I think less than just the technicality and how good you are at sketching, it's having a solid approach on an idea, where it's like, I just did a toy design sprint for 7 days. And I was like, I want to do something on education. I want to do something with outreach. I want to do something with all of these things that I know like Instagram people are going to love, because I know I don't have anything like that on my portfolio, but I need something that's going to be really attention grabbing and that perfect kind of like visual project that people are going to be like, oh, wow, look at this. This is really interesting. I haven't seen anything like this before. Let me share this on Instagram. Let me show my coworkers and all that.
Yeah.
Versus just like, sometimes you're like, my client wanted this. I made them this. Done deal. It's not as, I think it's just not as attractive sometimes, especially if that's all you're getting clients or getting from portfolios, students applying work.
Yeah, I think it's about finding that satisfaction of, you know, whether you are somebody that does it for the looks of it or somebody that does it for the making of it and the function of it, right? Because we were always taught like form follows function, that kind of thing. But a lot of people are just like creating the forms that look good, that sell, things like that. When they get into the role, I'm not sure, like, because I really haven't, I guess, like understood what they go into and how well they do. But I've seen a lot of renders and products that look amazing, right? Like you said, like shareable on Instagram, things where it's eye candy and things like that, where you look at it and you're like, oh, that's a cool product. Well, when you get into technicality, I don't know how well that does, right?
Yeah. Show me the internals, right?
Yeah. But I mean, like at the same time, it's like a lot of programs are focusing on it being an art degree, right?
Yeah.
For us, it's bachelor's of industrial design. For some people, it's bachelor's of science. For some people, it's just bachelor's of art. And they're coming in from art school, or they're coming in from a passion of art, or they're coming in from a place where they want to do art, where they want to create these products that look good, right? So maybe these people are doing CMFs. I don't know. Maybe they get into places where they can find a niche about finding materials that look good, right? Finishes that look good, things like that. I can't say because I really haven't dabbled into people like that yet.
Right.
But I know what you're saying. I think it makes sense. And going from that to what would you say is the big goal, right? So would you see yourself again like creating some of these projects for yourself, I guess, or these briefs for yourself where you can sell your work like that? Would you at a point consider making eye candy projects where it's just like, if that sells, then that's what I'm gonna make? Or like, are you just gonna be like, hey, like this is, because I know you like to, like, again, going back to our introduction of you do like to break those conventions, right?
Yeah.
You like to stay in that status quo where it's like, you like to break that, and you're like, hey, this is what I do, and this is exactly what I'm going to keep doing. And if you want to hire me for this, then good. If you don't, then too bad. I'm just going to go somewhere else. How do you find the balance of that? How long do you think that's sustainable? And again, what's the big goal with that?
Yeah. And again, with that breaking the mold thing, I wish professors were like, that's a really cool idea and we love that you want to do that, but also like, it's going to be hard for you to find work when you're doing stuff that is different. Right. But yeah, I think, there are so many different avenues you could go with creative work. And like you said, like some creatives have like more art-centered design degrees. Some people have an engineering. I would say ours is more business oriented. So there are plenty of ways you can apply. I just think at this point, like the business side is probably the most profitable, or it's the easiest to find work in, especially right now. Whereas like if you want to do something artsy, you can, but like you're probably gonna have a harder time finding work than if you're like looking at what's being sold, looking at what's on Instagram and what's like getting a lot of likes. And like, so yeah, like, I don't know, like sometimes I'm like, as much as I think like my comfort zone and what I'm good at is like understanding how things work. And like, yeah, this is a really cool render, but guess what? It works. And I've 3D printed it and I can prove it works, but I think that takes a lot of time. Like the kit I sold, it took me about 2.5 months of development. And I wasn't working on it every single day, but like, I could have spent like a week doing that easily, if I was like, like it doesn't fit perfectly, but it's just a render. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. It took me 2 days to model the body of that thing. And then it took me 3 days to do all the parts. So it's like, I think it depends on the project. It depends on what your end goal is. If your end goal was me, which is I knew I was wanting to sell this on Etsy and 3D print it, then like, yeah, you put in the effort, you do screw ports, all this, you put actual screws into your model, all that, or you can translate that to whatever industry or research or whatever. But if it's something smaller scale, like when I did that 7-day design sprint, it's like, yeah, like there's non-internals on there. I just have a bunch of diagrams of what's going to be there. And it's more the idea that I want to sell. You have to know what your focus is on each individual project. Because again, if you're designing something for yourself or designing something for your portfolio, it's like, what is the major thing I want people to see? Is it going to be the sketches I do? Is it going to be all the iterations I've done? Is it the CAD work? Is it the flashy renders that don't mean anything but look cool? And you kind of have to formulate your process around that, I think, right? Because like it is important. Like as much as I hate it, I think that's what I'm saying. Like I have to, like this project I'm working on is very like cushy and cool, and people, because like I think I at least need one in my back pocket where if someone's like, yeah, this is cool, but like what's that like? What's that really cool thing? I'm like, okay, I got it. Like I've had it waiting.
The wow factor,
yeah. So like, and that's what our professors always tell us is like, know your why when it comes to your portfolio. Know why you're doing this. But I think it's also like, know why you made this piece. Is it to showcase this skill? Is it to showcase that skill? I have a lot of projects in my portfolio that aren't sketch heavy. So like this one I'm doing, like I've done a lot of like really nice sketches, and I've done like a lot of really good iterations with that. Cause I'm like, I know like that's going to be really important to have at least one project that focuses on that. So like, it's all about kind of understanding what you're willing to sacrifice, either in your own time, your own energy, or sometimes your own virtues. Where it's like, as much as I don't want to do this, like dumb render for Instagram, sometimes you have to. And And again, not necessarily to Instagram, but there are plenty of things in life where you have to just suck it up and say, yeah, like this isn't something I want to do, but like, what options do you have? What options do we have as young designers coming out of school who have a hard industry to get into? There's not a lot. Like sometimes you have to kind of either sell yourself a certain way, sort of sugarcoat your experiences, say I'm from New York when I'm not from New York type of thing. You know, you have to do things to get by that aren't
right.
That you do in grace and apologize later.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it's worth it.
So it's fake it till you make it for you.
Yeah. Well, it's hard.
Or is it make it till you make it?
Because you're make it till you make it, right? In a way, or just like lie to yourself and tell you it's make it till you make it, even though sometimes you do have to fake it till you make it just to make yourself feel good.
Finding the balance. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess really like in connection to that, what do you have to say about overcoming doubt and facing the hard truths? So thinking about, you know, I have to do this because I've got to do this. Or, you know, just saying, hey, like maybe somebody out there is just a better renderer than I am of things that look pretty because I focus more on function. And as an engineer or as a person that thinks like an engineer or as a person that thinks about the internals first and then designing around it, you know, that's just something that I do and they don't, right?
Yeah.
So what would you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm a good person for that because, like, I have plenty of imposter syndrome a lot. And I have plenty of doubts a lot of the time where I'm like, I mean, I see people, there's not that many. So at least I have that silver lining, but I have a lot of people we went to school with who are like in the industry and are doing stuff right now. And I have plenty of people who aren't in this industry, but just have a college degree and are out doing certain things, even with COVID. And it's like, what makes me different? Like, why is it so hard for designers or our class or me in general to find work, whereas other people are at least finding something to do? And doubt gets in so easily, especially when I'm doing something that's like kind of, you know, again, like breaking the mold, doing something different. Sometimes it's very lonely because there's not that many people doing this, or the people who are doing this are not in the same caliber of creative or doing design work the same way you are. So sometimes you feel like, you know, you got, like in my case, it's like I'm kind of this sole voice sometimes doing this, where it can be tricky. And I think for me, it was like, well, I've got COVID. I never got COVID. Let me get that clear. Well, you've got this COVID situation.
I got COVID.
Yeah, I've got COVID. Put that on the YouTube. No, where it was like, I've got all this time, you know, how am I going to use this time wisely? And it was like, well, let me find like the one skill that I think I have like the most growth in, or like, you know, like some people on their resumes will have that bar graph or those like the stars that I hate, but they're like, I'm better at Photoshop than I am Illustrator, right? Right. Or I'm a better public speaker than I am, you know, doing this or that in my job. Yeah. I was like, well, let me just lean into that and not only make that like my best one, but like make it the best one, like make it really good. And so, you know, it's Fusion 360. It wasn't SolidWorks, but I was like, let me just like really get into CAD, like really get good at that. Because that was what I like to do. It was proficient. I was pretty good at, and it was because I like to do it and I was good at it. I was like, I'm not going to hate doing this every day during COVID when I'm in lockdown. So at least it's something. Versus sketching, which I'm like, I'm decent at sketching, but I don't like sketching, you know? So I was like, you know, both of them are, as long as they're profitable and as long as you know you can get hired for different things, find the thing you like to do and that you're good at and like get good at it. Like not only just be like, I'm pretty good at it, like make that your thing. And now I got like really good at surfacing. I got really good at doing like all sorts of things in parametric modeling that like when I was in school, I look back at some of my old work and I'm like, this took me like 2 weeks to like figure out how to do. Yeah. And I can do that in like less than 30 minutes, you know? Right. And it's like that growth. Sometimes you need that personal growth. Sometimes you need like to then be like, okay, good. Like I have done something. I'm not just stagnant. I'm not sitting in limbo where people have forgotten about me in this industry. I am doing something good. And luckily I'm in this situation where we're making products on Etsy and people are at least seeing my work and experiencing my work. Yeah. Whereas people don't have that ability sometimes in our work. People don't have the ability to produce what they're designing like I am. And then I have the reviews of people saying all these good things about my work and all this positivity. And that keeps me going as well, because a lot of times when I'm like, man, I don't have the skills. I shouldn't even apply for this job because I know I'm just an idiot. I can't do this. I can at least look at that stuff that I've already set myself up for and say, yeah, no, you are good. Like you have an ability to be a designer here, and that's important.
Yeah, and I think going back to that too, it's about putting in your 10,000 hours, like they say, right? Putting in that time to it. Like you said, you've been doing this CAD modeling for the entire time during COVID and things like that, and producing these things. So it's about putting in those hours, making sure that is the skill that you're working on, that you're honing, that you're about to make the best that you have, right? Again, it's like either you can be a journalist and be very good at or decent at a lot of different things, 100%. Which I guess I find myself feeling like a lot of times as well. But it's just because really maybe we haven't had the opportunity to put like our mind, our forces, our time to that one particular thing. When you've done that for 3D printing, 3D designing and modeling and things like that, then that's your 10,000 hours. That's things that you truly believe you're good at. So yeah, that totally bridges it all together.
Yeah, and I think with as creatives, like sometimes we can have so many different ideas floating around our head, or we have so many different skill sets that we can apply to in any job. We have so many different skill sets. And I think it's important to find, like, hone it back in and find the one thing that defines that and getting good at that. Yeah.
And really, I think that's a good way to maybe, take this show to an end today. But if there's anything else you would like to share with us today, anything we missed, if you had one chance to sell it to the international audience of this podcast, what would it be?
Talking about something I've made, or just an idea, or something I want to tell you?
Anything you would like to share? Anything?
I think one huge thing I've learned from, especially during lockdown and the pandemic, is humbling. And I don't think I was like necessarily someone who had a lot of like ego. But there were times where I would look at things on Instagram and be like, that stuff is garbage. Like, I can make better stuff than that. Like, why are people liking this? Or the fact that like, oh, like this sucks. I'm in lockdown. Like, I want to be doing other things. Like, I'm like, I think I was 24 at the time when lockdown started. I don't even remember how old I was. I was 24, I think, when lockdown started. I'm like, this sucks. Like, I took it seriously, but it also sucked. I was like, man, I'm like in the middle of my 20s and I'm like, I can't do anything. And it's like understanding that, like, yeah, you may not like that, but there are plenty of things in life that are going to be tricky, and understanding that, like, well, I do have a roof over my head. I'm not sick. I'm not dying. I can eat every day. Or in my creative work, it's like, well, like, I can, like, as much as that sucks, like, there are ways I can apply my work. Like, if I find the right avenues or find the right way of marketing myself, like, I don't have to have someone on Instagram doing some cushy render take a job from me, or something. Like, I can find ways to apply my work that's not just I don't have to compete the same way they're competing, right? So I think there are like ways of humbling yourself and saying, like, hey, like, your situation isn't as bad as you're making it. There are positivities in everything, and you can look at things half glass full. And I wouldn't say I'm necessarily an optimist, but just understanding how thankful we are sometimes. And sometimes we can take that for granted in the 21st century. And I think a lot of times media and what's going on in the world and sensationalism can make that seem different. But I think sometimes you just have to step away from things and really either like meditate, or find time for yourself, or find time to get away and watch an old movie with your grandma type of thing. And just like, look, like, there are times where you can sit down and just forget about the world and forget about what's going on and center yourself and kind of be introspective in what you're doing and say, yeah, like, things aren't as bad as they seem. Even though I don't have a full-time job and COVID is still going on. Like, there are plenty of positives that I have going on, or there are plenty of things that other people don't have that I have. And I think everyone can take that. And I think everyone who is doing anything right now can take that into anything they're doing, is just kind of, because again, like, it's not about humbling yourself necessarily. It's about just kind of being thankful for what you have. And I think we don't see that a lot in social media. We don't see that a lot in the world. So I think I wouldn't say it's a skill we're losing, but it's important just to remember, right? So
Yeah,
if I had to
especially
go away with anything, that's something positive and something heartwarming and everything that I think people can get away with.
yeah, and with Boxing Day, with Black Friday, with Christmas season, it's a little bit hard to be
Right.
for what you have. I think we're always expecting a little bit more from work, a little bit more from our jobs, our salaries, and all kinds of things. Like we're always expecting just a little bit more. And I think there's a good balance where expecting a little bit more, but also working towards it is a little bit different than just expecting and sitting on your ass doing nothing, right?
100%.
So
100%.
if you're thankful for it, I think it's good to be thankful, and it's good to be in a place where you can say, "Hey, I'm working for it, so I deserve it." Right? Again, putting in those 10,000 hours, whatever that might be, but also just a quick thing, like I don't know if you know the minimalists. They're just somebody I follow on Instagram, but they also have a podcast and things like that. But they talk about these things about, like fulfilling your desires and things like that, and making sure that you're not conditionally loving things or people and whatnot. One of my comments actually got liked by one of their heads, right? So there's just like these two people. They have like a documentary on Netflix and things like that. But saying that, you're pushing, let's say even you're pushing your partner to be in a place where they're just better. Like you can't, if you're going to just love somebody for who they are, yes, you can do that. But at the same time, if you're not pushing them to get on that next level, take that next step, be that better person tomorrow, then at a time, stagnancy can lead to many things that might not be good, right? Stagnancy can lead to things where you're not satisfied maybe again, because you're just like, hey, like, I found a better person, or I found a person that has more hustle and things like that. Or I don't know, like it could be more materialistic things like, they've got a better body, they've got, like more money, things like that as well. So it's about saying satisfaction, of course, comes from within, but it also comes from pushing yourself when you see other people, right? When you see these Instagram renders, when you see these people doing these things where you're like, hey, like, yeah, it's trash, but at the same time, it looks good, right? And maybe I should create that. Maybe I should have something in my back pocket that can be used as a trump card when it needs to be, right? I think that's where it really lies. So thank you so much, Andrew, for coming on the show today. And it was such a great time catching up, such a great time getting to know some of your experiences. And I'm sure people have got value out of this. So can you let people know where they can find you if they would like to talk about anything more about freelance, about those Nerf blasters, things that they would possibly find on your website as well?
Yeah. So, I have plenty of the socials. I have a Twitter and Instagram. I don't really use Twitter that much, like for anything creative wise. I haven't used my Instagram. I don't know if you saw, I posted for the first time in like 2 years, and I was kind of like, yeah. I did look back at the survey, and I was like, I saw even then, like a year ago, I was like, I'm not really on Instagram these days. And I was like, man, I'm after a year, I'm still not on Instagram. So I was like, well, let me post something. Yeah. But I plan on being more public there, which is Andy Marinera. Andy, like from Toy Story, and then marinara, like the sauce, all one word. Yeah. And Submarino Fabrications. So like my last name is Marino, Submarine with an O at the end, no E. Yeah. Submarino Fabrications on Etsy. And I have a trying to get a YouTube going. We'll see about a podcast and everything. But generally, like my Etsy, my website is andrewjmarino.com if you want to look at some of my work there. But it's generally, you can contact me in plenty of different things. I don't think you need my email or my social security number or anything. But you can DM me on Instagram if you really need anything or ask anything from me. I'm always willing to give feedback or help someone out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. And I'll put those links in the description. Hopefully somebody can reach out. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure we've found value in this episode. Thank you so much, Andrew. Looking forward to connecting again. And for now, of course, we're going sponsor free and we're going with the flow, but I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. I will continue to record and release these shows as I get some time, but the goal will be to get one out every week. Until then, don't forget to be kind to people, and stay safe out there. A big thank you so much to those of you that listen till the end and those that listen at all. This is your host Arjit Singh, and you've been listening to Kadam, the Small Steps podcast. If you found value in this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, let us know how we can make this better. A traditional career is always untraditional. Thanks for listening.